It was a cold November night in Ohio. The kind where the wind cut through your jacket and the streets felt empty and forgotten. Inside a small, dimly lit apartment, a man named Ethan Cole sat on his worn-out couch, watching his daughter, Maddie, sleep beside a flickering space heater. At 35, Ethan was a single dad doing everything he could to make ends meet. 2 jobs, late nights, early mornings, it was never easy, but for Maddie, he'd do it all again. That night, as he closed his eyes, a knock echoed through the door. It wasn't gentle, it was desperate. Ethan hesitated. At this hour? He opened the door and saw a woman standing there, shivering. Her clothes were soaked, her eyes red, her voice trembling. "Please," she said softly. "I just need somewhere warm to stay tonight." Ethan didn't know her. Not her name, not her story. But something about her face, the exhaustion, the fear, stopped him from shutting the door. He looked at Maddie, then back at the woman. His better judgment warned him to be cautious, but his heart whispered something else: kindness costs nothing. Before we dive deeper into this emotional story, if you enjoy true stories that remind us of the goodness still left in this world, make sure to subscribe to our channel, your channel name. Hit the like button, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support helps us spread more stories that inspire kindness, compassion, and hope. Ethan stepped aside and said quietly, "Come in. You can sleep on the couch." The woman hesitated, tears forming in her eyes. Thank you so much." She introduced herself as Rachel. She was in her late 20s, recently moved to town for work that had fallen through. She'd been living out of her car after losing her apartment 2 weeks earlier. That night, her car had broken down, and she'd been walking in the freezing rain for hours. Ethan nodded as she spoke. He didn't ask for proof or pry into her story, he just handed her a towel, some warm clothes from the dryer, and said, "Bathroom's down the hall. Make yourself comfortable." Rachel cried quietly that night, as she lay on a couch that smelled faintly of laundry detergent and crayons. For the first time in weeks, she felt safe. The next morning, Ethan was up early making pancakes, Maddie's favorite. The smell of butter and syrup filled the apartment. Rachel sat up, startled at first, then smiled shyly when she saw Maddie giggling at the table. "Good morning," Ethan said with a warm grin. "You like pancakes?" Rachel nodded. "I used to make them every Sunday. Haven't had any in a while." "Then today's Sunday," he said, laughing. They ate together, like old friends. It was the first time Rachel had laughed in weeks. As breakfast ended, Rachel said, "You don't even know me, and you still let me stay. Why?" Ethan shrugged. "A few years back, I was in a bad place too. Someone helped me when they didn't have to. Guess I'm just passing it on." Rachel looked down, her voice quiet. "The world needs more people like you." After breakfast, she made a call, one that Ethan didn't pay much attention to at first. She stepped outside, speaking softly, but he could see tears in her eyes again. When she came back in, she looked at him differently, like she'd just realized something huge. Later that afternoon, as Rachel was getting ready to leave, she said, "Can I get your full name? I just want to thank you properly someday." Ethan smiled. "You just did. Take care of yourself, Rachel." She nodded and walked out into the cold, disappearing down the street. Ethan didn't expect to see her again. Life went on: work, bills, and bedtime stories. Days passed, then a week, then 2. Until one afternoon, something unexpected happened. Ethan was at the auto shop where he worked part-time, hands covered in grease, when his phone buzzed. A strange number. He almost ignored it, but something told him to pick up. "Mr. Cole," a woman's voice asked. "This is Susan Blake from the Grant Foundation. We'd like to meet with you about a potential opportunity." Ethan frowned. "I think you have the wrong number." Susan laughed lightly. "No mistake, sir. You've been nominated for our Community Kindness Award, and there's something else. Can you come by our office tomorrow morning?" Ethan hung up in disbelief. He didn't understand. He wasn't a hero. He was just a dad trying to do the right thing. The next morning, he put on his cleanest shirt, dropped Maddie off at school, and drove downtown. When he arrived, his heart nearly stopped. Standing in the lobby, smiling brightly, was Rachel. "Rachel," he said, shocked. She nodded, tears filling her eyes. "Ethan, I owe you everything." Turns out, Rachel wasn't just a stranger in need. She was an assistant director at the very foundation that supported local families, though she'd been on medical leave and struggling after losing her fiancé and apartment. That morning after he helped her, she'd made a single call to her board director asking them to visit Ethan's neighborhood. "I told them about you," she said. "About your kindness, your daughter, your heart. You reminded me that there's still goodness in this world. And I wanted to help." Susan, the director, stepped forward with a smile. "Ethan, because of Rachel's story and your selfless act, we'd like to offer you a full-time position at the Foundation's Auto Repair Outreach Program. Better pay, better hours, and full benefits for you and Maddie." Ethan stood there, speechless. I don't know what to say." Rachel grinned through her tears. "Just say yes." That night, Ethan drove home in silence. The radio played softly as Maddie sang along in the back seat. He thought about that cold November night, the knock on the door, the stranger in need, and how one small act had come full circle. When they got home, he hugged his daughter a little tighter. "You know, Maddie," he whispered, "sometimes being kind doesn't come back the same day. But it always finds its way back to you." Maddie smiled. "Like a boomerang?" Ethan laughed. "Exactly like that." A few weeks later, Ethan started his new job. He worked on cars for struggling families, helping them get back on their feet, the very thing he once needed himself. Rachel visited often, bringing coffee and laughter, becoming part of their small, beautiful world. One evening, after work, Ethan found a note on his desk. It was from Rachel. It read, "When I knocked on your door that night, I'd lost faith in people. You gave it back to me. You reminded me that kindness doesn't need a reason, just a heart." Ethan folded the note and placed it in his wallet. Some things were worth keeping close. Months passed, and life slowly transformed. Ethan's small apartment became filled with warmth again, not just from the heater, but from laughter, gratitude, and friendship. Maddie grew up surrounded by the example of her father's kindness, learning that real strength doesn't come from what you have, but from what you give. And as for Rachel, she never forgot that night either. Every Thanksgiving, she came by with a pumpkin pie and that same warm smile. "For the man who opened his door when no one else would," she'd say. In the end, Ethan realized something powerful. The world doesn't change through grand gestures or big speeches. It changes through quiet moments, a door opened on a cold night, a warm meal, a place to rest. Kindness doesn't always make headlines. But it can rewrite someone's entire story, and sometimes, even your own. So, if you ever find yourself with a chance to help someone even in a small way, take it. You never know how far one simple act of compassion can reach. Because sometimes, the call that changes your life comes from the kindness you gave when no one was watching. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to your channel name. Let's keep spreading stories that remind us that in a world that can feel cold and distant, kindness still matters.